Hi everyone! Today we are going to be sewing point shoes together. The first thing you're going to want to do is cut your elastic. I always like to start with the elastic because it's easier to line up your ribbons once you have your elastic on. So the first thing you're going to want to do is cut that elastic in half, and then we're going to burn the ends. So one of these sets of elastic is going to be for one strap on one shoe and one strap on the other shoe. Now if you crisscross your elastic, we are going to go over that later in the video and you're going to need more elastic. But the reason why it's important to burn the elastic is so that it doesn't fray. As you can see, it went from frayed to a nice smooth edge. Once you get that done, you're going to pull out your thread and your needle, and we're going to cut off enough thread so that we don't run out. I like to take the end of the thread and tie it in a knot on the end. This just ensures that whenever you're sewing, you don't pull the end through and lose all of your stitching. I like to do it twice. This is a personal preference, but I just want to make sure that that knot is big enough so that I don't pull it through. It just gives me a little bit more security. Now I'm just going to cut the edge off so that I don't have to deal with the extra thread. And now we're going to thread our needle. So we're going to find the eye of the needle, which is the little hole on the back end. We're going to stick the thread through that hole and pull it just a little bit so that we have enough thread to catch, but not too much that it gets in the way. Once we have our needle and thread all set, we're going to find the back seam of the point shoe. This is the part that goes directly over your heel. This is going to help us to find where we're going to place our elastic, and it's going to go right next to that seam. Now, whenever we are sewing our shoes, there are two layers of fabric on a point shoe. There's the inside layer and there's the outside layer, which is the satin. What I like to do just to keep this process moving a little bit faster is to only sew on the inside layer. This is why I turn the shoe inside out. Put your needle into the first layer of the shoe and come out the elastic. Go ahead and pull it all the way through, and now we're going to just double check on the outside. As you can see, we did not go through that second layer. I like to keep my finger on the back of the shoe on that satin so I know where I'm at and to make sure that I don't go through. This just helps to not only keep things moving along, but it also helps the look because it is a more seamless look and you don't see any stitching on the outside of your shoe. Now, as we keep going, I like to take that extra thread that's on the outside of the knot and hold it down with my thumb, and you're just going to sew over it. So you're going to go under, sew on the first layer of the shoe and come out the elastic and keep that pattern going into the shoe, out of the elastic. After you do a couple stitches over that thread, it should stay in place and it just helps everything to look a little neater, and it helps me feel more secure knowing that my shoe is not going to come undone. So we're just going to go down the first side. We're going to go in the shoe, out the elastic, making sure that we're not going through the satin as we do it. Now once we finish that side part of the elastic, once we get to that corner, I'm just going to turn the shoe and we're going to start sewing along the bottom end. So our end goal here is to make a box along the outside of where the elastic is. So we sew on the outside, we get to the bottom, and we're going to sew on the bottom. We're going to still keep that pattern going of going into the shoe and out of the elastic all the way around. Now, this shoe has thinner material on the heel Some pointe shoes have a thicker material on the heel, and it might be beneficial to use a thimble to protect your thumb so you're not pushing your thumb onto the needle. It helps to give you a little bit more leverage. Now that we've finished that bottom side, I'm going to turn the shoe one more time so that I can continue that same pattern along the side. So you can see we have the side and the bottom done. Now we have the last side. We're going to go into the shoe and out of the elastic. Now that we've got all three sides of our box done, we're going to go ahead and finish off the seam. So we're going to put our needle into the shoe out of the elastic, but we're not going to pull it all the way through. I like to stick my thumb underneath that loop to make sure that I have a hold of it. We're going to take the needle and we're going to tie a knot, and I like to do this by going in and just wrapping around the thread as many times as I feel, and then you're going to pull the needle all the way through, and that's going to create a knot, and it's going to be nice and secure. Once that knot is secure, you can go ahead and take your scissors, and I like to cut as close as possible to the knot so that there aren't any hanging thread or anything that could get caught and unravel. Now that we have one side of the elastic done, we're just going to take the other side and we're going to loop it around to go onto the other side of that back seam. As you can see, when it's inside out, our elastic is also inside out, and when you turn it back, you can double check to make sure that the elastic isn't going to be twisted at all when you put your foot into your shoe. We're going to go ahead and put our thread through our needle, tie the knot on the end the same way we did the first time, and we're going to start sewing that second side of the elastic the same exact way we did with the first one. You can see I'm holding the end of the thread with my thumb that's on the outside of the knot to make sure that we are sewing it into our stitch. Now, just like the first elastic side, I'm going to sew down the side of the elastic and speed up this process a little bit. Go down the side, and then once we get to the corner, we're going to go ahead and rotate the shoe so I can go along the bottom. All right, we've made it to that bottom corner. One last one, and I'm gonna go ahead and turn the shoe so I can start stitching on the bottom. We're gonna go into the shoe and out of the elastic. Now that I'm done with that bottom part, I'm going to turn the shoe one last time and sew up the other side of the elastic. We're going to go in the shoe and out the elastic, making sure that we have that finger on the back so that we don't go through the satin part. Now, sewing does not always go as seamlessly as you would like. Sometimes the thread can get knotted. If this happens, I usually just like to find the loop, I'll stick my needle in and pull it all the way up, and the knot will come out by itself. Then you can go ahead and pull it all the way tight and keep sewing from there. Now that we're done with the box, we're going to tie it off the same way we did the other side of the elastic. We're going to go into the shoe, out the elastic, and make sure that we have a good hold of that loop so we don't pull it all the way through. Then we're going to take our needle and we're going to wrap it around the thread a few times. And we're going to pull it nice and tight so that it creates a knot. This is what your elastic should look like when you are all done. We have the box stitched around the elastic, and each side of the elastic is on either side of that back seam. And we can look and double check, we did not go through the satin at all, so it looks like it is nice and brand new. Now we are going to move on to our ribbon. We are going to cut our ribbon into 4 equal parts. We're going to have 2 pieces of ribbon for each shoe. Now, they may not stay in 4 equal parts, but it is easiest for when we're sewing. After you have them sewn on and you tie your shoes, if you want to cut down the ends a little bit, if one is longer, you can always go ahead and do that. And then we are going to go ahead and reburn them just like we did with the elastic. Now that we have our 4 pieces, we're going to burn the ends of our ribbon the same way we did with our elastics. This helps so that they don't fray and they have a nice neat edge for whenever we're sewing and tying our shoes. For this video, I am using elastic ribbon, which means that they're going to be stretchy. But I wanted to point out that with satin ribbon, there is going to be 2 different sides to that ribbon. There's going to be a shiny side that is super smooth and a matte side that's a little rough. You want to make sure that that shiny side is facing out. When you go to place your ribbon on your shoe, you see we have the back seam where we sewed the elastic, and there's going to be 2 seams that we're going to find on the sides of the shoe. One right there and one right there. When we go to place our ribbon, we're going to go ahead and turn that shoe inside out, and we're going to put it above the seam. We want it to be higher than the seam so it supports the arch of our foot whenever we're up in the shoe. Making sure to find that shiny side versus the matte side. Place it right next to that seam. so it's above it, closer to your heel than it is to your toe. We're going to go ahead and get our needle and thread ready, same way we did, tying the knot on the end, putting it through the eye of the needle, and we're going to line up our ribbon, and we're going to start the same way. We're going to go into the first layer of the shoe and out the ribbon, pulling it all the way through and tucking that back part of the thread so we can sew it into our stitch. Once we finish that side, we're going to keep the same pattern throughout the entire process. We're going to go down the side, we're going to turn the shoe, and then we're going to sew along the bottom. Once we finish that bottom, we'll turn and we'll sew up the other side. We've sewn up the side, now we're going to just tie it off just like the others. We're going to hold that loop so we don't pull it all the way through, wrap our needle around, and pull it nice and tight. Then we're going to snip off the extra thread as close as we can to that knot. We have one more ribbon to do and then we are almost done. We are going to make sure that we put that ribbon on the opposite side in line with where we put the first ribbon. We're going to make sure it's right next to that seam, opposite, so that we can have equal strength on our shoe. And then this is going to be the final product. We're going to look at our seam, make sure there aren't any loose threads, make sure everything is nice and tight so that it doesn't unravel. We have the elastic right next to the seam and the ribbon right next to the side seams. If you're going to crisscross your elastic, you're going to need 2 pieces of elastic per shoe. One piece of elastic is going to go on one side of that back seam, and the other piece is going to go on the other side, setting it up the same way we did if it was just one elastic. You're then going to take those pieces of elastic and cross them over each other. It's really important that those elastics stay behind the ribbon. We don't want them to interfere. The elastic is there to hold the shoe onto our heel, and the ribbon is there to support your arch. Making sure that even if you crisscross your elastic, they are both behind the ribbon. This is what we like to call the suspender elastic. This is great for anyone that has a disappearing heel and can't seem to keep their shoe onto their heel whenever they're dancing. Similar to how we do a crisscross, we're going to start with 2 pieces of elastic per shoe on either side of that seam, but instead of crossing them over each other, we're going to sew them on the same side of the shoe. It looks a little funky, but once we're done, we have 2 pieces of elastic that we're going to cross over each other. We do want to make sure that the elastics are still fully behind the ribbon so that they don't interfere. Once those are sewn, we just want to double check that the elastic isn't twisted at all so we can put it on as easily as possible. To put these on, you're going to take the 2 loops and cross them over each other to create a hole. There's going to be 1 cross in the back and 1 cross in the front. Your foot, represented by my hand, is going to slide into that hole, and from the top, it's going to look the same as if you were to cross your elastics, but you have that 1 extra cross in the back for the extra support so it doesn't slide off of your heel. I personally also have a disappearing heel, and I do this to my pointe shoes, and I love the support that it gives me. I don't have to worry at all if my heel is going to come off while I'm jumping or turning.